I'm a historical reenactor, and that's a big part of who I am. It's not my only identity, though. I'm also a nurse, an ex-soldier, and a bunch of other perfectly normal things. But I do have this one slightly quirky hobby where I slip into clothes that are about 600 years out of fashion and occasionally swing a hefty piece of steel while dressed like I just stepped off a medieval tapestry. Someone ought to write a psychological thesis on it, but for some reason, when you're decked out in historical garb, the usual social norms around sexuality and appropriateness seem to vanish. Picture this. If you're strutting through central Sydney as a Viking, women will let you scoop them up and carry them off from their friends without a peep of protest. Try that in jeans and a t-shirt, and you'll be zapped by a taser faster than you can say modern decorum. It works the same for women in armor, too. Otherwise, sensible men react to armed women in ways that are wildly outside the norm of everyday human interaction. I don't have a full explanation for it, but it's just how people seem to be wired. I was at a particularly large and well-known medieval festival or fair for any American readers out there. The atmosphere was deeply immersive, with the public encouraged to dress the part. About 400 of us genuine reenactors were scattered across the grounds, performing period activities like sword fights, archery, or crafting demonstrations, and spending the rest of the time mingling to add a splash of medieval flavor to the event. I looked pretty darn cool in my armor, if I do say so myself, but my 15th century civilian outfit? That's where I shine. Picture a crimson silk doublet, layered over sleek black fabric, paired with thigh-high boots adorned with spurs, and a single pearl earring for that extra dash of flair. It's the kind of ensemble that screams dashing nobleman straight out of a historical romance novel. One evening, I was wandering the festival grounds, playing the part of the gallant medieval gentleman and chatting with the public as we reenactors were encouraged to do. I'll admit I was leaning into the charm a bit, maybe flirting lightly and taking mild advantage of that strange disconnect where women seem to find a guy in a doublet and tights irresistibly approachable. Think Colin Firth in Shakespeare in Love, but with a touch more swagger. After a long day of mingling, delivering 2 lectures on medieval life, and soaking in the festive vibe, I was starting to feel the weight of exhaustion. I found a spot at one of the many food stalls, grabbed some hearty fare, probably a roasted turkey leg or some rustic stew, and sat down to eat. Nearby, a group of young women caught my eye. Staying in character, I struck up a conversation, and soon we were all laughing, chatting, and enjoying the playful, slightly flirty banter that the festival's atmosphere seemed to invite. It was harmless fun, the kind of interaction that feels like part of the reenactment experience. We talked for about an hour, sharing stories and soaking in the medieval ambience. Just as they left, one of the women came racing back, her face a mix of excitement and nerves. She leaned in close and whispered, "Hey, our friend really likes you. Here's her email address." She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand and darted off to catch up with her friends. I couldn't help but grin. Nothing boosts the ego quite like an unsolicited gesture like that, and I tucked the paper away, feeling a bit chuffed. When I got home, I checked my email and found a message already waiting from her. Apparently, she tracked down my details on the festival's website, where reenactors' bios are sometimes listed. I was still flattered. Her email was sweet, a little apologetic for reaching out so boldly, and she came across as the same bright, funny woman I'd chatted with at the stall. She was cute, too, from what I remembered. So I replied, and we exchanged a few emails over the next couple of days. The tone stayed light, with a hint of flirtation, but nothing over the top. Then, out of nowhere, the first nude photo landed in my inbox. Alarm bells started ringing in the back of my mind, but being a guy, I ignored them. I mean, come on, how much of a shock is it when a woman you barely know sends you a naked picture? My inner caveman was practically high-fiving himself, drowning out the voice of caution. The photo was flirty, almost artistic, so I leaned into the vibe a bit more in my next reply, thinking it was just a bold move on her part. Big mistake. Her response went into overdrive. The photos escalated quickly, going from suggestive to explicit. So explicit I started wondering if they'd be illegal even in Amsterdam. I was still flattered, sure, but the voice of reason was getting louder now, shouting over the ego's backslaps. I decided it was time to have a serious talk with her about what she thought was happening here. That's when things took a wild turn. She started throwing around phrases like love at first sight, soulmate, And brace yourself, marriage. Now, I'm no cat. I don't string people along or use them for kicks. I'm definitely not the love him and leave him type. But this was on a whole other level, far beyond anything I'd even remotely considered. Trying to be as diplomatic as possible, I gently told her I wasn't interested in continuing the conversation. At this point, it was still a quirky, slightly uncomfortable anecdote I could laugh about over a beer. But then it stopped being funny. She hacked my email account and launched a full-on character assassination campaign. She posted vicious lies about me on online forums and associations I was part of, painting me as some kind of heartless predator. It got worse. She somehow got my mother's phone number and called her. My mother. She spun an elaborate, completely fabricated story, claiming I'd seduced her, slept with her, I hadn't even kissed her, pressured her to terminate a pregnancy, and abandoned her after a miscarriage, leaving her with an STD to boot. I was blindsided. The explosive phone call from my mom, who was understandably shaken, hit me like a ton of bricks. I had no idea any of this was coming. She didn't stop there. She sent letters repeating the same wild accusations to my employer, the festival organizers, and even to trashy tabloid TV shows like A Current Affair, an Australian program known for sensationalist stories for my American readers. Fortunately, most of the people she contacted knew me well enough to give me the benefit of the doubt. It also helped that we lived roughly 800 kilometers, about 500 miles, apart, and my movements were easily traceable, confirming we'd only met that one time at the festival. Still, the whole ordeal was a nightmare. What started as a flattering encounter turned into a chilling lesson in how quickly things can spiral out of control. I've since been a lot more careful about handing out my contact info at events, and I've dialed back the medieval charm to avoid any more bunny boiler disasters. I've always enjoyed reading spooky nonfiction stories, especially those set in the wilderness, probably because I'm too much of a coward to go camping alone or venture far from civilization. In my 34 years, I've never experienced anything I'd call truly creepy or unexplained. My dad, on the other hand, has had a few encounters in his lifetime that are downright strange and unsettling. I saw him just the other day, and he gave me permission to share one of his stories that's always stuck with me, a tale that sends chills down my spine every time I think about it. Dad grew up in Mid-Coast, Maine, long before I was born, back in the 1970s. The area around his childhood home was something special, remote, quiet, and surrounded by dense woods. My grandfather owned a large swath of land, mostly forest, with no neighbors for miles. It was the kind of place where you could wander for hours and not see another soul. One evening in the early 70s, Dad was out hunting in the woods behind my grandparents' house, about a couple miles from home. He wasn't much of a hunter, to be honest. He rarely brought anything back. For him, hunting was more about soaking in the solitude, sitting quietly in the forest, and letting his thoughts wander as the world faded away. It was that time of evening when the light starts to dim, just before full dark settles in, and Dad was thinking about packing up and heading home. Suddenly, he heard it, a harmonica playing somewhere deeper in the woods, in the opposite direction from my grandparents' house, where he knew for a fact nobody lived. The tune was slow, melancholy, almost haunting, cutting through the stillness of the forest. Now Dad's a level-headed guy, not easily spooked, and definitely not the type to jump at shadows. Curiosity got the better of him, so he decided to track down the source of the music. He started walking toward the sound, his boots crunching softly on the forest floor, rifle slung over his shoulder. As he moved deeper into the woods, the harmonica's tune seemed to drift further away, like it was leading him on. He kept going, following the faint, eerie notes, but every time he thought he was getting closer, the sound would shift, always just out of reach. The forest was growing darker by the minute, the trees closing in around him, and a creeping unease started to settle in his gut. It felt wrong, like the music was deliberately luring him deeper into the wilderness. After a while, with the light nearly gone and that uneasy feeling growing stronger, he stopped. Whatever it was, he wasn't about to keep chasing it into the pitch-black woods. Shaking off the chill that had started to crawl up his spine, he turned around and headed back home, the harmonica's tune fading into the distance behind him. A year or two later, Dad was out hunting in those same woods again. This time, it was the dead of winter, A snowstorm was raging, blanketing the forest in white. He was bundled up against the cold, perched on a rocky outcrop the family called Porcupine Hill, named for the porcupines that nested in the small caves dotting the hillside. The snow was coming down hard, muffling the usual sounds of the forest, and Dad was sitting quietly, letting the solitude wrap around him like a heavy coat. Just as he was settling into the stillness, he heard it again, the same harmonica, playing that same melancholy tune, drifting through the storm from somewhere out in the woods. The sound hit him like a jolt. It was unmistakable, the exact same notes he'd heard before, carrying that same haunting weight. This time, though, he didn't move. The memory of that first encounter, the way the music had seemed to pull him deeper into the unknown, was still fresh. The snowstorm only made it worse. Visibility was low, and the idea of trudging through the blizzard after some phantom harmonica player felt like a bad idea. A shiver ran through him, not just from the cold. It felt like the music was calling to him again, tugging at something primal, but he wasn't having it. He packed up his gear, turned his back on the sound, and made his way home through the swirling snow, the harmonica's tune lingering faintly until it was swallowed by the storm. I grew up in that same area, and even when I was a kid, those woods were empty for miles. Nobody lived out there, and it wasn't until much later that developers started clearing trees and building housing developments. Dad's never been one for wild theories, but he's convinced there was something off about that harmonica. He's not alone either. I've read similar stories online about people hearing harmonicas in remote, isolated places with no clear source. There's no folklore I know of that explains it, but Dad and his brothers have had other strange experiences in those woods over the years. Whatever it was, that melancholy tune in the middle of nowhere left a mark on him, and every time he tells the story, I can't help but feel a little uneasy, wondering what might have been out there, playing in the dark. I have a stable job, a really good one, actually, but sometimes life throws expenses at you that demand a little extra cash. I'm in the middle of moving into a bigger, nicer apartment, which means I've been shelling out money for deposits and moving costs. I'm not broke by any means, but who doesn't appreciate a bit of side income? I decided to sell some clothes I never wear. I'd already donated a bunch of older stuff to the Salvation Army, but for the nicer pieces, things I hadn't even worn and could fetch a decent price, I turned to online platforms. I'd had great luck with the LetGo app in the past. It's never let me down. Craigslist, though, that was new territory for me. My friends had shared stories of successful sales there, so I figured I'd give it a shot. One item I listed was a cute, short-sleeved, black and white floral dress, priced at $12. It was a steal, honestly, and I was confident it would sell quickly. I included my phone number in the ad for direct communication since I don't check my email often. For the listing photo, I use a picture my friend had taken of me wearing the dress. It didn't show my face, just my body in the dress against a plain white wall, keeping things neutral and professional. A couple of hours after posting, my phone buzzed with a text. "Hey, I saw your dress on sale. Is it still available?" It read. I replied, "Yeah, it is, feeling optimistic about a quick sale." The response came back almost immediately. "It's kind of hard to see the dress in the picture you posted. Do you have any more pictures of you in the dress?" That struck me as a bit odd. The photo was clear enough to show the dress's style and fit, but I figured maybe they wanted a better look. To be helpful, I sent 2 additional pictures, one of the dress hanging on a hanger to show its full shape, and another close-up to highlight the floral pattern's details. I texted back, "Here are a couple more shots to show the dress better." Their reply was curt and unsettling. I asked for pictures with it on. "I'll just look at the ad tomorrow." A chill ran through me. Why would someone insist on seeing me in the dress? I didn't respond, my gut telling me something was off. I tried to brush it aside, but the interaction left me uneasy. 2 days later, at 7 a.m. on my day off, my phone rang, jolting me awake. I usually keep my ringer on because I'm on call for work, but seeing an unknown number flash on the screen instead of my workplace's ID made my stomach drop. I was annoyed. Who calls that early on a Saturday? I let it ring out, hoping they'd give up. They didn't. The phone rang again immediately. Grumbling, I cleared my throat and answered, ready to give whoever it was a piece of my mind. A raspy, gravelly man's voice greeted me. Yes, hello, are you the one selling the dress? He said. I hesitated, then replied, Yeah, I am. I'm calling for my wife, he continued. My name's Mark, and yours? I gave him my name, trying to keep things polite, but he stumbled over it repeatedly, asking me to spell it out over and over. Is it Mary? No, Marie. It went on like that, frustrating me to the point where I wondered if I was being pranked. After what felt like the 20th time spelling my name, we finally moved past introductions, and he got to his questions. Is this a thick dress? He asked. Yeah, it is, I said, thinking it was a reasonable question. Can it be worn as a fancy dinner dress? It can be, I replied. You can dress it up or keep it casual, depending on how you style it. Then things took a turn. Okay, how tall are you? He asked. I frowned, unsure why that mattered, but answered, I'm 5'3". So my wife's pretty short, around your height, he said, pausing. Do you wear a bra with a dress? I froze, my discomfort spiking. She can wear it with or without, I said, keeping my tone neutral. But he pushed further. No, but do you wear a bra with it? Have you ever worn one with it? His insistence made my skin crawl, and I snapped, She can wear it however she wants. My answers grew short, hoping he'd take the hint. He didn't. So, where are you right now? I feel like I woke you up, he said, his voice taking on a probing edge. Alarmed, I lied to protect myself. Yeah, I'm at a friend's place right now, a girlfriend's place. I'm not home. I emphasized girlfriend to avoid any weird assumptions. He pressed on, Oh, just a friend? Did you sleep in the same bed as her? My jaw dropped. Can we move on? I'm not home right now, I said, my voice sharp. Mercifully, his phone cut out mid-sentence, and I let out a shaky breath, hoping that was the end of it. A minute later, he called back. Sorry, my phone died, he said, picking up right where he left off. So, anyways, what size cup are you? My heart pounded. Excuse me, I said, incredulous. Listen, I don't feel comfortable answering that. He ignored me. Is it a B or a C? You look big-breasted, very gifted. My wife has a nice, do you? I was shaking now, my voice firm but trembling. Listen, I don't want to answer this. You're making me feel uncomfortable. I'm going to hang up. He kept going, unfazed. Does the dress ride up when you walk? Does it show your ass? I hung up, my hands trembling, tears welling in my eyes. He didn't stop. He called again and again, the unknown number flashing relentlessly. By the 20th call, I was a wreck. I answered, ready to scream. Listen, I'm not selling the dress anymore. I shouted. His voice came back, low and menacing. I know where you live. I want that dress. I hung up immediately, collapsing into sobs. I was terrified, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do. If he wanted the dress for himself, for whatever reason, why not just say so? Why pretend it was for his wife? Did he even have a wife, or was that a lie to get me talking? I had so many questions, each one feeding my fear. The calls kept coming relentless, and I felt trapped, unable to block an unknown number. To make matters worse, I got an email around the same time from someone calling themselves Mr. Anonymous, asking about selling smelly old flats. It wasn't related to the dress, but it added to my paranoia. Was this normal for Craigslist? I'd heard horror stories, but my friends' positive experiences had lulled me into a false sense of security. Now I was scared out of my wits, regretting ever posting that ad. The dress stayed in my closet, unsold, and I swore off Craigslist for good, haunted by the thought that this guy might actually know where I lived. When I was 16, my family lived in a typical Midwest subdivision in a large town, the kind of place with neatly trimmed lawns and cookie-cutter houses. Our neighborhood sat on the corner of a busy road and a quieter one that turned into a dirt road after a short stretch. The other two sides were bordered by dense woods, giving the area a secluded feel despite being part of a bustling town. Across the less-traveled road was a trailer park, which had a bad reputation back then. When we first moved there at age 9, the town was grappling with a serial pedophile and rapist, a dark cloud that hung over our community and made parents extra vigilant. It spooked my family, along with most of our neighbors, and shaped the way we lived. Our house was right on the edge of the subdivision, with only a grassy berm separating our backyard from the trailer park and that quiet road. Being so close to the outskirts meant it was pitch black at night. No streetlights illuminated the area, just an inky darkness that swallowed everything beyond our windows. We were out in the middle of nowhere, far enough that police response times could be painfully slow. Every night, we had a strict lockdown routine. Double-check all the deadbolts, bar the 2 big sliding glass doors in our living room, secure the easily accessible windows, and draw the heavy wooden blinds over those glass doors. It might sound excessive, but my parents didn't keep guns in the house, and with the town's history, they weren't taking chances. That routine was non-negotiable. At the time of this incident, we had 2 Jack Russell Terriers, scrappy little dogs that always slept in my parents' bedroom with the door closed. Every single night, without fail, they'd curl up on Mom and Dad's bed, growling at anyone who dared disturb their sleep. Our male Jack, named Jack, was particularly territorial. He never bit anyone, but if you tried to move him while he was sleeping, he'd bare his teeth and snarl like a tiny guard dog. One night, though, things went off script. We were all sprawled on the couch in the living room, watching a movie. When it ended, Mom went to shift Jack, who was dozing on her lap, and he snapped at her, nipping her finger just enough to draw a pinprick of blood. She was furious, more hurt than injured, and banished him to his crate in the living room for the night. In her anger, she didn't bring him upstairs like usual. Another thing out of place that night, Mom forgot to close the wooden blinds over the sliding glass doors, leaving them exposed to the dark backyard. Everything seemed fine as we went to bed. Jack was sulking in his crate, the house was locked up minus the blinds, and we all drifted off to sleep. Around 1 a.m., chaos erupted. Jack went berserk, barking and snarling like he'd seen the devil himself. His crate was right by the glass doors, giving him a clear view of the backyard. Jack had a history of losing it over other animals, cats, squirrels, even birds, so we were used to his alarm barks. But this was different. His frenzy was next level. Mom and I were the first to stumble into the hallway, hearts racing, and we bolted downstairs to the living room, expecting to find him terrorizing one of our cats. To our relief, the cats were nowhere in sight, and Jack was still in his crate, though he was rattling it like he wanted to tear it apart. Mom opened the crate, and Jack shot out, charging straight for the glass doors, barking furiously at the darkness outside. Mom and I exchanged a glance, both thinking the dog had lost his mind. "What's gotten into him?" I said, half laughing, half annoyed. To check, we flipped on the patio light, flooding the backyard with a harsh glow. Nothing was there, just the empty patio and the grassy berm beyond. No raccoon, no stray cat, nothing. We decided not to let Jack out, worried he'd bolt into the night and we'd spend hours chasing him. Mom switched off the light, slid the wooden blinds closed, and dragged Jack upstairs, muttering about his antics. We all went back to bed, chalking it up to the dog being his usual high-strung self. The next morning, my sister and I were walking up the driveway when we spotted our backyard neighbor, a young mom, crossing the berm with a worried look. "Everything okay?" I asked. She shook her head and told us their tool shed had been broken into overnight. Our neighbor, a handy guy with a young family, kept a collection of expensive tools in there, but oddly, the only thing missing was a single screwdriver. Then she mentioned that another neighbor, my friend Ashley's family, who lived 2 doors down, had an incident the same night. That got my attention. Mom went inside to call Ashley's mom while I started some laundry, tossing clothes into the dryer in the living room. I was working on homework at the coffee table when Mom hung up the phone, her face as white as a sheet. She looked straight at me, and I knew something was wrong. "What happened?" I asked, my stomach nodding. Mom's voice was shaky as she explained. Last night, Ashley's mom and younger brother had fallen asleep in their basement watching a movie. Around 1:30 a.m., she woke to scraping and shuffling noises outside their glass walkout door. Alarmed, she ran upstairs to wake her husband, who brushed it off but agreed to check. He always kept his cell phone on him, even when sleeping, since he was a supervisor at a Chrysler plant. When he pulled back the blinds and flicked on the backyard light, he came face to face with a large man standing right outside the door. The guy bolted, but Ashley's dad called the police from his cell, later discovering their phone lines had been cut and their upstairs glass doors had been tampered with. The cops arrived half an hour later with a K9 unit, but the dogs lost the man's scent at the dirt road. As Mom finished the story, the dryer's exhaust kicked on, venting hot air near the sliding glass doors. The glass fogged up, and my eyes caught something that made my blood run cold. A massive handprint, smeared across the door at an angle, like someone had been trying to force it open. Mom stopped talking, and we all stared, frozen. My sister, my parents, and I held up our hands to compare. No one's matched. It was bigger than Dad's, far too large for any of us. The print was smudged, as if the person had pressed hard, testing the door's resistance. We called the police, who came to take photos and document the handprint. They never caught the guy, but they had suspicions. Ashley, her two sisters, my sister, and I were all runners, often jogging around the subdivision and along the dirt road. The open layout of our neighborhood made it easy for someone to watch us from a distance, unnoticed. As we pieced it together, a chilling realization hit. The intruder hadn't targeted our neighbor's house with a big Rottweiler or gone after expensive tools. He seemed to be zeroing in on homes with teenage girls. Jack's freakout that night, his relentless barking at the glass doors, likely scared the guy off. That little dog, as ornery as he was, might have saved us from something truly horrific. I still get goosebumps thinking about how close we came to disaster, and I'll never forget the sight of that handprint fogging up in the morning light. I'm not sure exactly when it started, but I think it was about 1 or 2 months ago. I'm a creature of habit, sticking to a predictable routine, so I notice even the smallest changes in my surroundings pretty quickly. It all began one night when I was lying in bed, trying to drift off to sleep. Out of nowhere, a foul stench hit me, like really bad feces, the kind that makes your nose wrinkle and your stomach churn. The smell was intense, almost as if it was clinging to me, filling the entire room. I sat up, confused, and started sniffing around, checking under the bed, near the windows, even my own clothes, trying to pinpoint the source. But it was everywhere, inescapable, like it had seeped into the walls. I opened a window, hoping to air out the room, but the odor lingered, heavy and oppressive. Then, as I was still searching for the smell's origin, I heard it, a distinct tapping sound. It started above me, right on the headboard of my bed, where my fan was pointed. At first, I thought the fan's blades might be hitting something, creating the noise. But when I turned the fan off, the tapping didn't stop. It was deliberate, rhythmic, like someone with long fingernails drumming them left to right, over and over. The smell eventually faded, and I haven't noticed it since that night, but the tapping, that's become a nightly occurrence. It's not just on the headboard anymore. It moves. Sometimes it's on the walls to my left or right, sometimes across the room on my computer desk, as if something is perched there, tapping away in a sporadic, almost annoyed rhythm. It's loudest right before I'm about to fall asleep, snapping me back to alertness just as my eyes start to close. I've tried to figure out what's causing it. I turned off the fan, checked for loose pipes, even inspected the desk for anything that could be making the sound. No luck. It's not mechanical. There are no moving parts that could explain it. The tapping only happens when the lights are off, plunging the room into darkness. The second I flick on a lamp or even the flashlight on my phone, it stops like whatever's making the noise knows I'm watching. It's eerie, and it's starting to wear on me. Since the tapping began, other weird things have happened. One night, my blinds crashed to the floor with a loud bang, waking me up in a panic. I checked the window, thinking maybe it was loose or a gust of wind had knocked them down, but everything was secure. No breeze, no explanation. Another time, I woke up to find a Jack-in-the-Box toy sitting in the middle of my kitchen floor. I don't own a Jack-in-the-Box, and I live alone. The sight of it, with its bright colors and creepy clown face, sent a shiver down my spine. I tossed it in the trash, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it didn't belong there, like it had been placed deliberately. Then there's the crackling. Every now and then, I hear static-like pops coming from my electronics, my TV, my laptop, even my phone, when they're not in use. It's not constant, but it happens often enough to make me jump. Just recently, I was in my room when I heard the distinct sound of an empty water bottle being crushed, the plastic crinkling loudly. I searched everywhere, but there was no bottle, crushed or otherwise. My heart was racing as I stood in the middle of the room, listening to the silence that followed, half expecting the tapping to start up again. I've tried to confront whatever this is. I stood in my room, lights off, and said out loud, "You need to leave. You're not welcome here." I've done it in a firm, prayer-like tone, hoping it would make a difference. It didn't. I prayed silently, too, pleading for peace, but the tapping persists, night after night. I'm not entirely scared of it, not yet, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever's causing this doesn't have good intentions. It feels like it's toying with me, like it's waiting for something. The atmosphere in my room has changed. It's heavier, like I'm being watched, especially at night when the tapping starts. I don't know how to describe it fully. It's more intense than words can capture. It's not just the sounds or the strange occurrences. It's the way they make me feel, like I'm sharing my space with something I can't see. I want it gone, but I'm at a loss for how to make that happen. I've checked for logical explanations, faulty wiring, rodents, anything, but nothing adds up. The tapping, the smells, the objects appearing out of nowhere. It's all too deliberate, too purposeful. I just want my home to feel like mine again, but for now, I'm stuck listening to those nails tapping in the dark, wondering what's out there and what it wants from me. This happened 3 years ago, in the middle of July, when I was 16 years old. I live in a suburb of a city in Ontario, Canada. People often think of Canada as a safe place, almost idyllic, but that perception doesn't stop creeps from showing up. Weird stuff happens here more often than you'd expect, and my story is proof of that. My neighborhood isn't the safest in the city, but it's generally fine during the day, especially in busy, well-lit areas. Back then, I loved taking evening walks during the summer, usually just before sunset. My parents had a strict rule. I had to be home before dark, no exceptions. The path I took was along the sidewalk of a main road, where cars zoomed by regularly. Even in the evening, there was steady traffic, people heading home from work, so it felt safe enough. One evening, I was strolling along, minding my own business, enjoying the cool air brushing against my skin. A car honked as it passed, sharp and sudden. I barely registered it, unsure if it was aimed at me, and kept walking. There wasn't much foot traffic on the sidewalk, just me and the occasional jogger. Up ahead, the sidewalk crossed an entrance to a small plaza, where cars could turn off the main road to park. I glanced both ways to make sure no one was pulling in and crossed the entrance. As I stepped onto the other side, I noticed the same car from earlier out of the corner of my eye, slowing down near the plaza. That's when it clicked. The honk was probably meant for me. My stomach tightened, but I told myself I was overthinking it. Against my better judgment, I looked back. The driver, a man, locked eyes with me through his open window. He was turning into the plaza entrance but stopped his car right in the middle, completely blocking the sidewalk. No one could walk past without stepping onto the road, and any cars wanting to enter the plaza were stuck. I froze, confused and a little alarmed. He opened his door and stepped out, walking toward me. Instinctively, I backed up to keep some distance. He wasn't particularly tall, maybe a few inches taller than me, but something about him set me on edge. He wore big black sunglasses, hiding his eyes, and a Brazil t-shirt from the FIFA World Cup, which was a big deal that summer, paired with white pants. For my American readers, the FIFA World Cup is a massive global soccer tournament, and team merch like that was everywhere at the time. He started talking, his voice calm but insistent. "Hey, I thought you were the woman who works at this shop I go to," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the plaza. I shook my head. "No, that's not me," I said, keeping my tone polite but firm. I knew it was a red flag. His story sounded like a flimsy excuse, but I wasn't panicking yet. My guard was up, though, and I scanned the road for passing cars, hoping their presence would deter him. I didn't want to talk, but I also didn't want to seem scared, worried that showing fear might embolden him. He kept trying to make conversation, undeterred by my short answers. "You're beautiful," he said, smiling. I nodded awkwardly. "Thanks." He said it again, then again, each time with a little more emphasis, until it felt less like a compliment and more like a weight pressing down on me. I forced another "thank you," my discomfort growing. Then he asked, "How old are you?" I hesitated, then said, "I'm a minor, hoping it would shut him down. It didn't. He tilted his head, unfazed, and asked, "Where are you from?" I figured ethnicity wasn't too personal, so I said, "I'm from Syria." In a moment of nervous habit, I asked him the same question, instantly regretting it for feeding the conversation. He claimed his country's former president was Syrian, which I doubted, a convenient lie to keep me talking. "Arabic women are so beautiful," he added, his voice lingering on the word. He kept circling back to calling me beautiful, pretty over and over, until I was squirming inside. I forced a tight smile, my heart beating faster. He shifted gears. "Are you looking for any guys? Are you interested?" I shook my head firmly. "No," he pressed. "What, did a boy cause you trouble?" I snapped, "That stuff's a waste of time," hoping my bluntness would make him back off. He didn't. "You're so beautiful, I don't see why boys wouldn't like you," he said, his tone almost pitying. I let out an awkward laugh, unsure how to respond, my mind screaming, "What the hell do I say to that?" He doubled down. "Seriously, how old are you?" I sighed, too worn down to lie. "I'm 16. He paused, then said, "Wow, I never would have thought you were 16. You seem way more mature, like at least 24. My stomach churned. He was fishing, and I'd given him too much. Seizing the moment, I asked, "How old are you?" He didn't hesitate. "I'm 32, twice my age." My skin crawled, but I kept my face neutral. "What's your name?" I asked, thinking maybe having his info could be useful if things went south. "Jonathan," he said. He grinned. "And yours?" I smirked, trying to seem confident. "That's a secret." Looking back, I'm grateful he didn't get aggressive, but at the time, I was kicking myself for dragging this out. He gestured to his car. "Come on, I'll move it so we can talk more." I shook my head. "No, I've got to go." He frowned. "Why?" Then he started pushing for my contact info. "Can I get your number?" I said, "I don't give my number to strangers." He didn't let up. "What about Facebook?" "WhatsApp?" For my American readers, WhatsApp is a popular messaging app used worldwide, especially in Canada. I kept saying no, my voice growing sharper. Finally, he said, "Look, I'm going to go move my car." I saw my chance. "Okay, I've got to go." "Bye," I said, turning to walk away. I heard him mutter bye behind me, and for a moment I thought it was over. But as I walked, I glanced to my right and saw his car creeping along the road, keeping pace with me. He rolled down his window, smiling and waving, his expression unsettlingly cheerful. My heart raced, and I picked up my pace, clutching my phone. I looked back again, and he was gone, his car now parked at a gas station just behind me. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. I spotted him on foot, walking on the same sidewalk, closing the distance. Panic surged through me, and my fight or flight kicked in. I broke into a run, kicking off my sandals to avoid tripping, the pavement cool against my bare feet. I darted toward home, just a few minutes away. On the way, I stopped two women passing by, gasping, "There's a man following me." They glanced at me like I was unhinged and kept walking, offering no help. My chest tightened, but I kept running, fueled by adrenaline. I made it home, slamming the door behind me and locking it. Peeking out the window, I saw no sign of Jonathan. He must have turned back when I started running, but I couldn't be sure. I was lucky. The encounter happened on a busy road, with cars passing regularly. If it had been a secluded area, I'm convinced he would have tried something worse. His presence felt wrong, predatory, like he was sizing me up. That was the end of my evening walks. I haven't taken one since. I still shudder thinking about how close I came to danger and how my attempts to stay calm might have kept me talking to him longer than I should have. I'm just grateful I made it home safe, sandals and all, and that Jonathan's creepy smile didn't follow me any further. I've always been fascinated by the paranormal and urban legends, but they never scared me. As a kid, I devoured ghost stories and unsolved mysteries, spending hours reading about strange occurrences. I was a bit of a loner, so I had plenty of time to lose myself in those tales. My small, quiet town was pretty boring. Nothing exciting ever happened, and when it did, the whole place buzzed with gossip. I never imagined I'd have my own creepy encounter, one that would leave me rattled for weeks. I had one close friend, Will, who lived on the other side of town in a rougher neighborhood. We'd hang out at his place, playing video games or chilling at the local park. His mom was strict, rarely letting him come to my house because of where he lived, so I was the one making the 40-minute trek to his. There was a shortcut through the town's old cemetery that shaved about 15 minutes off the walk, and being a lazy teenager, I took it most of the time. The cemetery was peaceful during the day, with its rows of weathered gravestones and towering oak trees casting long shadows. It never felt creepy until the night everything changed. Will and I had planned a day of gaming at his place. He pre-ordered Call of Duty Black Ops 2, a big deal back then, and his parents were away for the weekend, giving us free reign of the house. But that morning, I got into a huge argument with my mom over something stupid, and she grounded me. I was 14, and the idea of missing out on gaming with Will felt like the end of the world. We hatched a plan. I'd sneak out after midnight since my bedroom was on the ground floor and head to his place. I'd play until around 5 a.m., then slip back home before anyone noticed. It seemed foolproof, but looking back, I wish I just stayed put. Around midnight, I was ready. I climbed out my bedroom window, leaving the latch open for my return, and grabbed my house key just in case. The night was cool, the air sharp against my face as I jogged down the street. The town was dead quiet, lit only by the faint glow of yellow streetlights. As I ran, I noticed two figures walking toward me. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, holding the hand of an older boy who looked about my age. The streetlights cast an eerie glow on them, but I didn't think much of it at first. I kept jogging, eager to get to Will's. As I passed them, something felt off. Their clothes were plain, almost outdated, a purple hoodie and blue jeans on the boy, a simple dress on the girl. I couldn't put my finger on why, but they seemed strange, out of place. On impulse, I glanced back, and my heart skipped a beat. Both of them had stopped and turned, staring right at me with blank expressions. My legs moved faster, almost sprinting now, as a wave of unease washed over me. I just wanted to get away from them. After about 10 minutes, I reached the cemetery gates. The metal bars loomed in the darkness, and I stood there, catching my breath, debating whether to take the shortcut or stick to the main road. The main road was safer, but risked me getting spotted by a passing car. My mom would kill me if word got back to her. Against my better judgment, I hopped the gate and started jogging down the cemetery's main path, a long stretch lined with massive oak trees that blocked out the moonlight, casting deep shadows over the graves. My sneakers crunched on the gravel, the only sound in the stillness. I was halfway through, my breath puffing in the chilly air, when my body froze. A voice cut through the silence, soft but clear. "Excuse me." I whipped around, heart pounding, and there he was, the boy from earlier, standing about 10 feet away, alone. His purple hoodie seemed to swallow the light, and his face was half hidden in shadow. I stared, speechless, my mind racing. How had he gotten here so fast? I hadn't heard footsteps, and the cemetery was locked at night. He spoke again, his voice flat. "Why?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. Then, in a shaky voice, I blurted, "Shut up." As the words left my mouth, I got a clear look at his face. His eyes, or where his eyes should have been, were pitch black, like empty voids. A faint glint, like a reflection of light, flickered in them, sending a shiver racing up my spine. My brain screamed run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. In the distance, I saw the little girl, standing motionless next to one of the oak trees, her small figure barely visible in the dark. She was just staring, her head tilted slightly, those same black eyes fixed on me. I'd read about black-eyed children before. Urban legends about kids with soulless eyes who ask for help, luring people into danger or worse. The stories flooded my mind, each one more terrifying than the last. The boy took a step forward, and I stumbled back, my breath hitching. "Please don't hurt me," I stammered, my voice trembling. "Please, just leave me alone." Tears pricked my eyes as I begged, my body shaking. He spoke again, his voice low and emotionless. "Please help me," he said, taking another step. That snapped me out of it. I turned and ran, my legs pumping as fast as they could carry me. The gravel crunched underfoot, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I didn't look back, didn't dare, until I reached the far gate. I scrambled over it, nearly tripping, and landed on the other side under the glow of streetlight. I collapsed to my knees, sobbing, my whole body trembling. I stayed there for what felt like forever, maybe 10 minutes, trying to pull myself together. My mind was a mess, replaying those empty eyes, that eerie voice. It was 12:30 a.m. now, and the last thing I wanted was to be out in the dark anymore. I abandoned my plan to go to Will's and sprinted home along the main road, the streetlights my only comfort. For a week after, I barely slept, jumping at every shadow, convinced those kids had followed me home. I kept my bedroom curtains drawn, my door locked, and avoided the cemetery like the plague. I've been back since, but only in daylight, and I stick to the edges, never the main path. I never saw those kids again, but the memory of their black eyes haunts me. I dug into black-eyed children's stories afterward, and they were all eerily similar. Kids asking for help, appearing out of nowhere, leaving people terrified. I don't know what I saw that night, but it wasn't human. To this day, I avoid walking alone in the dark, and the thought of that cemetery at night still makes my blood run cold. I've lived in Massachusetts my whole life, 17 years of the same routine, waking up on cold mornings, grabbing a Dunkin' coffee, and heading to work or school, depending on the day. It's predictable, almost comforting in its monotony. But one chilly Saturday morning, when I had the day off, something happened that shook me to my core and changed the way I see the world. My longtime friend Jacob and I decided to hang out at his place. It was around 10 a.m. when I rolled up to his house, and we figured we'd kick things off with a smoke and a walk in the woods behind his backyard. For context, those woods are dense, starting abruptly at the edge of his property. A narrow path about 200 feet long cuts through the trees, leading to a clearing roughly 100 yards square. The clearing was meant for farming years ago, but was never used, so it's just an empty, grassy patch surrounded by towering pines. As kids, Jacob and I loved exploring back there, pretending we were adventurers in some untamed wilderness. As teens, it became our go-to spot to smoke and chill, a private hideaway where we could escape the world. That morning, we set out along the familiar path, the crunch of leaves under our sneakers the only sound in the crisp air. Partway down, we heard what sounded like another set of footsteps trailing behind us. We froze, listening. The steps kept going for a second before stopping, almost like they were mimicking us. It was broad daylight, 10 a.m., so we could see clearly. No one was there. Jacob shrugged it off, saying it was probably a deer or a squirrel, but I wasn't so sure. A knot formed in my stomach, though I didn't say anything. We kept walking, the unease lingering like a shadow. When we reached the clearing, everything seemed normal. We found our usual spot, a patch of grass near the center, lit up and started chatting. I pulled out my phone to play some music, cranking up Joy Division and the Smiths' Sargota bands. Jacob and I were those kids who thought we were born in the wrong decade, obsessed with 80s music and acting like we were tougher than we were. In reality, we were just two dorky teens trying to figure out life in a small town. We smoked, laughed, and let the morning slip away, the music blending with the rustle of the wind through the trees. After a while, we got hungry and decided to hit the convenience store down the road for some breakfast burritos. The family running the store made killer ones, stuffed with eggs, sausage, and just the right amount of spice. There was a shorter path from the clearing that led to the store, so we took it, cutting through the woods. The burritos were as good as ever, and we savored them as we headed back to the clearing, ready to pick up where we left off. But when we got there, something was off. In the middle of the clearing stood a table draped with a red cloth. It hadn't been there before. We hadn't put it there, and as far as we knew, no one else ever came out to this spot. It was just us. The table looked out of place, almost staged, its bright red cloth stark against the muted greens and browns of the forest. Jacob and I exchanged uneasy glances. "What the hell is that?" I muttered, my voice low. He shook his head, just as confused. It was creepy, no doubt, but we didn't want to mess with it. Something about it felt wrong, like touching it would invite trouble. We decided to leave it alone, finish our burritos, and head back to Jacob's house. We had plans to meet some friends at the skate park later to hang out and maybe smoke some more, so we tried to push the table out of our minds. The skate park was a blast. We skated, joked around, and soaked up the day, the weirdness of the clearing fading into the background. But as evening rolled around, Jacob and I decided to head back to the clearing one last time before calling it night. Maybe we were curious, or maybe we just didn't want to let some random table scare us off our spot. As we walked through the woods, the air felt heavier, the path darker under the thickening canopy. About halfway down, we noticed an eerie orange glow flickering through the trees, coming from the clearing. We stopped, exchanging a look that said we both felt the same dread. I switched off my phone's flashlight, and Jacob did the same, letting our eyes adjust to the dim light. As the glow came into focus, my blood ran cold. About 20 figures, draped in black robes, stood in a circle around a fire in the center of the clearing, right where the table had been. We crouched behind a tree, barely breathing, watching in stunned silence. The figures were chanting, their voices low and rhythmic, a collective murmur that sent chills down my spine. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound was hypnotic, almost otherworldly. Then, cutting through the chant, came a scream, a blood-curdling, animalistic shriek, like something was being torn apart. It didn't sound human, more like a wild creature in agony, and it snapped us out of our trance. Jacob's eyes were wide, his face pale in the firelight. "We gotta go," he whispered, his voice shaking. I nodded, my heart pounding so hard I thought it had burst. We turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush, branches snapping under our feet. The woods seemed to close in around us, the path stretching endlessly as we sprinted toward Jacob's house. We didn't stop until we burst through his back door, slamming it shut and locking it. We were both shaking, out of breath, too freaked out to speak. We didn't sleep that night, sitting in his living room with the lights on, jumping at every creak of the house. The image of those robed figures, the fire, that scream, it was burned into my brain. The next morning, we gathered our courage and went back to the clearing, half hoping we'd imagined it. What we found was worse than any nightmare. The red-clothed table was still there, but on it lay a butchered corpse, something unrecognizable, a mangled mess of flesh and bone. The stench hit us like a wall, rancid and overwhelming. Jacob gagged, dry heaving into the grass. I couldn't move, my eyes locked on the grotesque scene, my mind struggling to process it. We stumbled back to Jacob's house, called the police, and waited, our hands trembling as we tried to explain what we'd seen. The cops came, took photos, and taped off the area, but they were tight-lipped. Weeks later, they followed up but refused to share any details, saying it was an ongoing investigation. It's been a year since that day, and Jacob and I haven't set foot in the clearing since. We don't talk about it much, but when we do, the fear creeps back, raw and unshakable. Whatever we stumbled onto that night, some kind of ritual sacrifice, or worse, it wasn't meant for us to see. The woods behind Jacob's house don't feel like our old playground anymore. They're a place of secrets, dark and untouchable, and I'm not sure I'll ever feel safe near them again. I grew up in Las Vegas during the late 90s and early 2000s, a chaotic stretch of about 12 or 13 years where my family bounced around from North Las Vegas to Henderson and everywhere in between. My dad's inability to hold down a job kept us on the move, and his unreliable streak landed us in some pretty sketchy situations. I'm not naming names here, not because I'm protecting anyone, but because the guy my dad got tangled up with is out of prison now, and his associates aren't the kind you want knocking on your door. This story is about one of those situations, a moment that still haunts me, not just for what happened, but for the guilt I carry over how it ended. Dad fell in with a crook who promised him the easy life, fast money, no strings attached. This guy was a lowlife, scamming the elderly, forging checks from people on death row, even stealing mail from random mailboxes. I was just a kid, so I didn't fully grasp what was going on. All I knew was that we suddenly ended up in a nice upper-middle-class gated apartment complex with a pool and an activity room, a far cry from the rundown places we'd lived before. For a while, it felt like we'd hit the jackpot. I was too young to question how we could afford it, but looking back, it was all built on dirty money. I was struggling through high school at the Las Vegas Academy, a performing arts school that sounded cool, but where I never quite fit in. I hated it, felt like an outsider, but I was determined to push through, head down, just trying to graduate. Because of our constant moves, I had to get up before sunrise to catch the bus to school, often around 4 a.m. My bus stop was at an elementary school a couple of blocks away, a quiet spot near a highway lined with casinos and budget motels. For my American readers, Las Vegas isn't just the glitzy strip. The areas around it, like where we lived, could be gritty, with transients and shady characters passing through. I'd walk from our apartment, past the neon glow of a nearby casino whose name I can't recall, to the bus stop. Despite the occasional catcall or shout from a passing car, I never felt unsafe. I was a teenager, maybe a bit naive, and I figured I could handle myself. Looking back, I realized how lucky I was that nothing serious had happened until it did. One morning, I noticed a car that kept showing up at the bus stop. It wasn't just passing by. It was too regular, too deliberate. The driver would slow down as he passed, his car creeping along the curb, close enough that I could feel his eyes on me. I didn't know how long he'd been watching, but it was enough to make my skin prickle. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he was just a parent dropping off a kid at the school or someone lost in the early morning haze. But the way the car lingered, its engine idling as it crawled by, set my nerves on edge. I started standing farther back from the road, clutching my backpack, scanning for the bus's headlights. Then one day, he stopped. The car pulled up right at the bus stop, the window rolling down with a faint hum. "Hey, get in," he said, his voice calm but commanding, like he expected me to comply. He was a middle-aged guy, nondescript, with a baseball cap pulled low and a face I couldn't quite make out in the dim light. My heart pounded, but I shook my head, stepping back. "No, I'm good," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He didn't turn off the engine, just opened his door and stepped out, circling around the car toward me. My stomach dropped as he reached for my arm, his fingers brushing the sleeve of my hoodie. "Leave me alone," I shouted, jerking back, my voice echoing in the empty morning. I braced for him to grab me again, but to my surprise, he froze, glanced around, and backed off. Maybe he was worried my yelling would draw attention, or maybe he saw the bus's lights in the distance. He got back in his car, gave me one last look, and drove off, tires squealing faintly against the asphalt. I stood there shaking until the bus pulled up. The whole ride to school, I kept replaying it, wondering what he'd wanted, what could have happened if I hadn't yelled. When I got home that afternoon, I told my dad everything, my words tumbling out in a rush. He listened, his face darkening, but he didn't say much, just nodded and told me to be careful. A few days later, the guy was gone. The car stopped showing up at the bus stop, and I never saw him again. I thought that was the end of it, a close call I could put behind me. Years later, I found out what really happened. My dad's shady associate had a friend, someone you didn't cross, the kind of guy who operated in the shadows of Vegas's underbelly. Apparently, Dad had told him about the creep at the bus stop, and they took care of it. I don't know the details, and I don't want to. This wasn't a case of calling the cops or filing a report. This was the kind of justice that happens quietly in places like Las Vegas, where bodies sometimes end up buried in the desert. For my American readers, the desert around Vegas has long been a rumor dumping ground for those who cross the wrong people. Think mob stories and true crime documentaries. Dad got us out of that lifestyle soon after, cutting ties with a crook and his crew. We moved again, and I haven't seen my dad in years. Good riddance, honestly. He was trouble, and his choices dragged us through hell. I'm 26 now, in college, working a steady job and building a life I'm proud of. But this story sticks with me, not just because of the fear I felt at that bus stop, but because of the guilt. I almost regret telling my dad about that guy. Whatever happened to him wasn't justice, it was vengeance, and it probably wasn't pretty. If I'd called the police instead, maybe I wouldn't carry this weight, this nagging feeling that my words led to something dark. I thank God every day that I made it out of that situation, that I'm here now, living a good life. But I'll never shake the memory of that car slowing down, or the sinking realization that my dad's world reached out and touched it in a way I'll never fully understand. When I was about 10 years old, my family decided to go on a camping trip in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, a place known for its rugged wilderness and dense forests. For my American readers, the Upper Peninsula, or UP, is a remote region of Michigan, separated from the rest of the state by Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, famous for its untouched nature and sparse population. My dad was a big outdoorsman, always dragging us on hikes or fishing trips, but this was our first real camping adventure as a family. It was just me, my parents, my older brother Ethan, who was 13, and our golden retriever Max. We were all excited, especially me, picturing roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories by the campfire. We drove for hours to reach the campsite, a secluded spot deep in the Porcupine Mountains, a state park with miles of trails and thick woods. The campground was basic: pit toilets, no running water, and sites spread far apart for privacy. Our site was tucked near a small creek, surrounded by towering pines and hemlocks that blocked out most of the sunlight, even during the day. We set up our tent, a big green one with enough room for all four of us and Max, and spent the first day exploring. Ethan and I raced along the creek, skipping rocks, while Dad built a fire and Mom unpacked our cooler. Max bounded around, chasing squirrels and barking at nothing, his tail wagging like crazy. It felt like the perfect start to a great weekend. That night, we sat around a campfire, eating hot dogs and s'mores. Dad told a cheesy ghost story about a lost hiker, which made Ethan roll his eyes but had me giggling nervously. The air was cool, the stars bright above the treetops, and the crackling fire kept us warm. Max curled up next to me, his head on my lap, snoring softly. Around 10 p.m., we doused the fire and climbed into the tent. I was tired but buzzing with excitement, whispering to Ethan about how cool it was to sleep in the woods. He told me to shut up and go to sleep, but I could tell he was just as thrilled. Mom and Dad were in their sleeping bags on the other side of the tent, and Max sprawled out near the entrance, his ears twitching at every rustle outside. Eventually, I drifted off, lulled by the soft sounds of the forest. Crickets chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze. I woke up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding. I didn't know why at first. The tent was dark, and everyone else was still asleep. Max was sitting up by the tent flap, his body tense, a low growl rumbling in his throat. That wasn't like him. He was a friendly dog, never aggressive, even with strangers. I whispered, "Max, what's wrong?" But he didn't move, his eyes fixed on the tent's mesh window. I glanced at the window, expecting to see a raccoon or maybe a deer, but there was nothing, just the black outline of trees against the faint moonlight. My stomach twisted, a cold dread creeping over me. Something felt wrong, like the air itself had thickened. Then I heard it, a heavy crunch, like a footstep snapping a branch just outside the tent. Max's growl deepened, his fur bristling. I held my breath, listening. Another crunch, closer this time, followed by a slow, deliberate rustle, like something big moving through the underbrush. My mind raced. Maybe it was a bear. Dad had warned us about black bears in the UP, but he'd said they usually avoided people. I nudged Ethan, whispering, "Wake up." He groaned, half asleep, but sat up when he heard Max's growl. "What's going on?" he muttered, rubbing his eyes. Before I could answer, another crunch sounded, so close it felt like it was right outside the tent wall. I crawled to the mesh window, my hands shaking, and peered out. At first, I couldn't see anything, just shadows and the faint gleam of the creek in the distance. Then, maybe 10 feet away, I saw it, a massive figure standing between two trees. It was tall, at least 7 or 8 feet, with a broad, hunched frame that didn't look human. Its body was covered in dark, matted fur, glinting faintly in the moonlight, and its arms hung low, almost to its knees. I couldn't see its face clearly, but its head turned slowly, like it was scanning the campsite. My breath caught in my throat, and I grabbed Ethan's arm, squeezing hard. "Look," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ethan leaned over, his eyes widening as he saw it. "What the hell is that?" he hissed, his voice trembling. The creature didn't move at first, just stood there, its silhouette unnervingly still. Then it took a step toward the tent, its footfall heavy, snapping another branch. Max's growl turned into a sharp bark, loud enough to echo through the campsite. The creature froze, its head jerking toward the tent. For a split second, I saw its eyes, yellow, glowing faintly, like a wolf's caught in headlights. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd pass out. Dad stirred, sitting up groggily. "What's with the dog?" he mumbled, but Ethan cut him off. "Dad, there's something outside," he whispered urgently. Mom woke up too, clutching her sleeping bag. Dad grabbed his flashlight, unzipping the tent flap just enough to shine the beam outside. The light swept across the trees, catching nothing but branches and leaves. The creature was gone, vanished into the darkness. Max kept barking, straining against Dad's grip on his collar. "Quiet, boy." Dad snapped, but his voice was tense, like he sensed something was off. We sat there in silence, the flashlight beam darting around the campsite, finding nothing. Dad tried to calm us down. "Probably just a bear," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. Mom hugged me close, her hands trembling. Ethan and I exchanged a look. We both knew it wasn't a bear. Bears didn't stand upright like that, didn't have eyes that glowed yellow. The rest of the night, we stayed awake, huddled in the tent, listening for any sound. Max never settled down, his ears perked, growling softly until dawn. No more footsteps came, no rustles, but the fear lingered, heavy and unshakable. The next morning, Dad checked around the campsite. He found a few broken branches near where we'd seen the creature, but no clear tracks. The ground was too rocky and covered with pine needles. He didn't say much, just packed up our gear and said we were cutting the trip short. We didn't argue. Ethan and I were too freaked out to stay another night, and even Max seemed eager to leave, sticking close to us as we loaded the car. The drive home was quiet, none of us wanting to talk about what we'd seen or hadn't seen as Dad kept insisting. He tried to brush it off, saying we'd let our imaginations run wild, but I could tell he was rattled too. For weeks after, I had nightmares about those yellow eyes, waking up in a cold sweat, convinced the creature was outside my window. I never heard of anything like it before, but years later, I stumbled across stories online about creatures in the UP. Some called them dogmen, others said they were like Bigfoot or werewolves. The descriptions matched what I saw. Tall, furry, upright, with glowing eyes. I don't know what it was, and I don't care to find out. We never went camping again, and I avoid the woods at night now, even as an adult. The Upper Peninsula is beautiful, but it's got a wildness to it, something ancient and untamed, and I'll never forget the night it showed itself to me, standing just beyond the glow of our campfire. I was 15 years old, living with my family in a small, quiet town in upstate New York, the kind of place where everyone knows each other and nothing much ever happens. Our house was an old two-story Victorian, creaky and drafty, with a basement that always felt a little too damp and dark. It was just me, my parents, and my younger sister, Lily, who was 11 at the time. My parents were going out for the evening to a friend's dinner party, leaving me in charge. It wasn't unusual. I'd been babysitting Lily for a couple of years by then, and we had a routine: order pizza, watch a movie, and make sure she was in bed by 10. The house was on a wooded lot, set back from the road, with no close neighbors, which never bothered me before. But that night, everything changed. It was a chilly fall evening, the leaves outside turning red and gold, crunching underfoot as my parents headed out around 6 p.m., locked the doors, keep your phone on, and call us if you need anything. Mom said, giving me her usual worried look. "We'll be back by midnight." I nodded, rolling my eyes playfully. "We'll be fine, Mom. Go have fun." Lily was already sprawled on the living room couch, flipping through Netflix, begging for extra mozzarella on the pizza. I locked the front door behind them, checked the back door, and settled in for a cozy night. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the TV and Lily's chatter about which movie we should pick. We went with The Princess Bride, a favorite of hers, and dug into our pizza when it arrived, laughing at Inigo Montoya's lines. Around 9 p.m., Lily started yawning, her eyes drooping. I nudged her. "Time for bed, kiddo." She groaned but didn't argue, trudging upstairs to brush her teeth and change into pajamas. I followed to make sure she didn't sneak her tablet under the covers, tucking her in with a quick hug. "Don't let the bedbugs bite," I teased, flicking off her light. She giggled, already half asleep. I headed back downstairs, planning to finish the movie and maybe scroll on my phone until my parents got home. The house felt a little too big now, the silence pressing in, but I shook it off, grabbing a blanket and curling up on the couch. Just as I hit play, I heard it, a faint creak from the basement. Our house had a rickety wooden staircase leading down there, and it always groaned under any weight. I paused the movie, listening. Nothing. I figured it was just the house settling. Old places like ours made all kinds of noises, especially when the temperature dropped at night. I restarted the movie, but a minute later, there it was again, a slow, deliberate creak, followed by the unmistakable sound of the basement door clicking open. My heart skipped a beat. The basement door was at the bottom of those stairs, always kept closed because of the damp smell. There was no way it could just swing open on its own. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling, and crept toward the kitchen, where the door to the basement stairs was. It was still shut, locked from our side, but I could hear faint shuffling below, like something moving across the concrete floor. My mind raced. Maybe a raccoon had gotten in, but how? The basement windows were tiny, barely big enough for a cat. I whispered to myself, "Stay calm, it's nothing," but my body wasn't listening. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I dialed my dad's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Probably no signal at their friend's house. I tried Mom next, same thing. I didn't want to scare Lily, so I didn't wake her, but I was starting to panic. Then I felt it, a cold, prickling sensation, like someone was watching me. I spun around, expecting to see Lily sneaking downstairs for a snack, but the living room was empty. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like it was pressing down on my chest. I backed away from the basement door, clutching my phone, and headed to the front window to check the driveway. No cars, no lights, just the dark outline of the trees swaying in the wind. I double-checked the locks on both doors, my hand shaking so badly I fumbled with the deadbolt. The shuffling in the basement stopped, but that didn't make me feel better. It made it worse, like whatever was down there was listening now, waiting. I ran upstairs to check on Lily. She was still asleep, her soft snores filling the room. I closed her door quietly and stood in the hallway, unsure what to do. My room was at the end of the hall, and I decided to hole up there until my parents got home. I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet, something I kept from Little League, and sat on my bed, the door locked, my phone in one hand, the bat in the other. The house was silent again, but it wasn't a comforting silence. It felt like the calm before a storm. Around 10:30 p.m., I heard a new sound, a faint tapping, like fingernails on wood, coming from the hallway. It was slow, deliberate, moving closer to my door. My breath hitched, and I gripped the bat tighter, my eyes glued to the doorknob. The tapping stopped right outside my room, and then, God, I'll never forget it, I heard breathing. It was heavy, ragged, like someone standing inches from the door, exhaling against the wood. My whole body went cold, my heart hammering so hard I thought I'd pass out. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my voice was stuck in my throat. Then, the worst part, something brushed against my arm. I was alone in the room, the door still locked, but I felt it cold, almost slimy, like fingers grazing my skin. I yelped, swinging the bat wildly, hitting nothing but air. The breathing outside stopped, and the air in the room shifted, like whatever had been there was gone. I sat there, sobbing quietly, too terrified to move, clutching the bat like it could protect me from whatever this was. I didn't sleep, didn't even blink, just stared at the door until I heard my parents' car pull into the driveway around midnight. I ran downstairs, bat in hand, and threw myself into Mom's arms, babbling about the noises, the breathing, the touch. Dad checked the basement, flashlight in hand, but found nothing. No signs of a break-in, no animals, no open windows. The basement door was still closed, though he swore he smelled something sour down there, like rotting meat. They tried to calm me down, saying it was probably my imagination, the old house playing tricks, but I could tell they were spooked too. Lily slept through it all, blissfully unaware. For weeks after, I couldn't be alone in the house. I'd hear that tapping at night, faint but unmistakable, always stopping when I turned on the light. The feeling of being watched never left, especially in my room. We moved a year later, and I was relieved to leave that house behind, but I still dream about it sometimes. That cold touch, that ragged breathing. I don't know if it was a ghost, a demon, or something else, but it wasn't human. I've read about paranormal experiences since, stories of entities that feed on fear, and it feels too close to what I went through. That night, something invaded our home, and I'm just grateful it didn't follow us when we left. I was about 6 years old when this happened, living in a small town in Ohio with my family. It was the early 2000s, a time when fast food joints like McDonald's were the go-to spot for kids' birthday parties or a quick treat after school. For my American readers, McDonald's play places were iconic back then. Indoor or outdoor jungle gyms with slides, tunnels, and ball pits, designed to keep kids entertained while parents grab a coffee or a burger. Our local McDonald's had one of the best play places around, a sprawling maze of colorful plastic tubes and nets that felt like a kid's paradise. I loved it there, and my grandma often took me after kindergarten to burn off energy while she sipped her coffee and chatted with other regulars. That day started like any other. It was a warm Saturday afternoon in spring, the kind where the sun is just bright enough to make everything feel cheerful. Grandma picked me up from our house, promising a happy meal and some playtime. I was thrilled, bouncing in the back seat of her old Buick, clutching my favorite action figure, a beat-up Spider-Man toy I carried everywhere. We pulled into the McDonald's parking lot, the golden arches gleaming against the blue sky. Inside, the place was buzzing with families, the air thick with the smell of fries and ketchup. Grandma ordered my usual, a cheeseburger Happy Meal with apple slices and a chocolate milk, plus a small coffee for herself. We settled at a table near the play place, where I could see kids scrambling through the tubes, their laughter echoing off the glass walls. I wolfed down my burger, barely chewing, eager to join the fun. Grandma smiled, ruffling my hair. "Go play, but stay where I can see you," she said, her voice warm but firm. I nodded, kicking off my sneakers and stuffing them under the table with my Spider-Man figure. I climbed into the play place, the soft padding cool under my socks as I crawled through the tunnels, giggling as I dodged other kids. The structure was a labyrinth of red, yellow, and blue tubes, with mesh nets and lookout bubbles where you could peer out at the dining area. I felt like an explorer, weaving through the maze, my heart racing with the simple joy of being a kid. After a few minutes, I noticed a man inside the play place. He stood out immediately. He was an adult, tall and lanky, with messy brown hair and a faded green t-shirt. Adults didn't usually go into the play place unless they were chasing after a toddler, but this guy didn't seem to have a kid with him. He was crawling through the tunnels, moving slowly, his eyes scanning the kids around him. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he was someone's dad looking for his child. I kept playing, sliding down a curvy slide and climbing back up to the highest platform, a bubble with a clear plastic dome where I could see Grandma sipping her coffee below. That's when he approached me. I was catching my breath in the bubble, watching the other kids, when he poked his head into the opening. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was too wide, too forced, showing too many teeth. "Hey, kid," he said, his voice low and raspy, like he'd smoked too many cigarettes. "Want to play a game?" I froze, clutching the edge of the bubble, my stomach twisting. I was shy around strangers, and something about him made me uneasy. "What kind of game?" I asked, my voice small. He leaned closer, his breath sour, like old coffee. "It's called Follow the Leader. I go first, and you follow me through the tunnels. It's super fun." I glanced down at Grandma, who was chatting with another woman, her back slightly turned. The man followed my gaze, his smile tightening. "Don't worry about her," he said. "We'll be quick. Come on, it's just a game." My heart started pounding, but I didn't know how to say no. I was only 6, taught to be polite to adults, and part of me wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a silly game. I nodded hesitantly, and he grinned, crawling into the tunnel ahead of me. "Follow me," he called, his voice echoing weirdly in the plastic tube. We started moving through the play place, him leading the way, glancing back every few seconds to make sure I was behind him. He took us deeper into the structure, away from the main slides and nets, toward a quieter section near the back where the tubes twisted into tight corners. The noise of the other kids faded, and it was just us, the plastic creaking under our weight. My unease grew with every turn. He kept looking back, his eyes glinting in the dim light filtering through the colored plastic. "You're doing great," he said, but his tone was off, almost too eager. I started lagging behind, my hands sweaty, wishing I'd stayed near the slide. We reached a dead-end tunnel, a small platform with no exit except the way we'd come. He stopped, turning to face me, his body blocking the path. "This is the best part," he said, his voice dropping lower. Now we hide here for a bit. My chest tightened, and I shook my head. I want to go back, I said, my voice trembling. His smile faltered, and he reached out, his hand hovering near my shoulder. Just stay a little longer, he insisted, his fingers twitching like he wanted to grab me. Panic surged through me, and I shrank back, my back pressed against the tunnel wall. Before he could say anything else, I heard Grandma's voice, sharp and loud, cutting through the place. "Tommy, where are you?" She sounded worried, her words echoing up the tubes. The man's face changed, his eyes darting toward the sound. I seized the moment, scrambling past him, my knees scraping the padding as I crawled as fast as I could toward Grandma's voice. He didn't follow, but I could feel his eyes on me, heavy and unsettling. I burst out of a tunnel near the main slide, nearly colliding with another kid, and spotted Grandma standing at the place entrance, her hands on her hips, scanning the structure. I ran to her, throwing my arms around her waist, my heart still racing. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked, kneeling to look at me. I tried to explain, my words jumbling together, about the man, the game, the creepy tunnel. Her face hardened, and she stood up, scanning the place. "Where is he?" she demanded, her voice fierce. I pointed toward the back, but when we looked, he was gone. Grandma marched over to the counter, demanding to speak to the manager, describing the man and what I'd told her. The staff searched the place, but he'd slipped out, probably through the side exit near the parking lot. Grandma took me home right after, skipping the rest of her coffee. She sat me down in our living room, her arm around me, and asked me to tell her everything again, slowly. I did, tears welling up as I realized how wrong it all felt. She hugged me tight, promising I'd done the right thing by coming to her. My parents were furious when they heard, and for weeks after, they wouldn't let me go to McDonald's or anywhere with a place. Grandma started keeping a closer eye on me at playgrounds, her usual easygoing smile replaced with a watchful gaze. Looking back as an adult, I know how close I came to something terrible. That man wasn't playing a game, he was luring me, isolating me in a place where no one could see. If Grandma hadn't called for me when she did, if I hadn't run, I don't know what would have happened. The memory still gives me chills, the way his smile didn't reach his eyes, the sour smell of his breath, the way he blocked that tunnel. I'm grateful for Grandma's quick instincts, for her voice pulling me back to safety. That McDonald's is still there, but I haven't been inside since. The place doesn't feel like a kid's paradise anymore. It's a reminder of the day I learned that even the brightest places can hide something dark.